As far as car maintenance goes, changing your brake pads and brake rotors is one of the easier things you can do that most people go to a mechanic for. There's a short list of tools you need, and obviously you need to buy some new pads and rotors, but the actual process is pretty straightforward. I personally made a lot of mistakes that forced me to go to the store to buy stuff several times, but I'll tell you what to do and what to get to avoid that. Obviously, you'll need to buy new brake pads. New rotors aren't usually necessary, but they're not expensive and my old ones were looking pretty rusty. There are quite a few tools you'll need. A jack to raise your car. I just used the one that came with my car, but if you don't have one or you plan on working on your car more often, I recommend a proper floor jack. Make sure whatever jack you're using is rated for how heavy your car is. Jack stands. To change your brakes, you only need one, but they come in pairs. Even though you're not going to be crawling under your car for this, I don't recommend cheaping out on safety. They're cheap anyways. Brake cleaner. You'll need a can of this to clean off your brake rotors and also in case you get any grease on your rotors during installation. A breaker bar and lug nut socket. If you're sure that you can loosen your lug nuts without one, you might be able to skip this, but it came in handy more than once for me. For the socket, make sure you have one that fits the lug nuts on your car. My OEM wheels have 21mm nuts. Brake lube. This is the grease that lets your brake components move around easily. Wrenches. The brakes on this car need 14mm and 17mm wrenches. If you're not sure, a couple monkey wrenches might also work. Torque wrench. You need one so you can tighten your bolts to the correct torque. Too much and you'll break something, too little, it'll fall off. Turkey baster. This is for removing extra brake fluid out of your brake reservoir. Wire brush so that you can scrub clean some of the components. Not strictly necessary, but good to have. C-clamp for pushing in your caliper pistons. A stiff wire, zip ties, or a piece of string, something like that for hanging your brake caliper after you take it off. A wheel chock or brick to keep your car from rolling around. A Phillips head screwdriver or Phillips head bit for your socket wrench if you have a Japanese car. And that's pretty much it as far as tools you need. First things first, we need to get rid of all the grease on the rotors. They come out greasy so that they don't get rusty, but obviously grease doesn't make your brake rotors work better. Now let's just take them outside, spritz them with some brake cleaner, and wipe them off. I chose these rotors because they were made by a popular company, Centric, and because the non-friction areas have this black coating on it. My old rotors are pretty rusty, and this coating should help keep the rotors looking nice for longer. I did look at a lot of slotted and cross-drilled rotors as well, but my conclusion was that they don't do anything for me other than looking cooler. Before we jack up the car, we need to loosen the lug nuts while the wheel is still on the ground. A breaker bar makes this a lot easier if the lug nuts are hard to turn. Now that that's done, next we have to take off the wheel. Before you get started, take a brick or wheel chock and stick it behind the wheel opposite to where you're jacking the car up from. I'm going to raise the front left side first, so I'm going to take this landscaping paver and pop it behind my rear right wheel. Next, I need to grab the jack that came with my car. In my car, it's hidden behind this little door in my trunk. Does the OEM jack suck? Yeah, but it'll get the job done. You might not have one, in which case you'll need to buy a jack, obviously. The official Mazda Blessed jack point on this car is here between these two notches. Check your owner's manual if you're not sure. Just be sure that you jack the car at some point on the frame that will support the weight. You don't want to put your jack underneath the floor and punch a hole in the bottom of your car. And actually, for a long time, I debated whether to just buy a floor jack for $80 from Harbor Freight. It would have saved me some time here, but if I did get it, I would have gone over budget. Essentially, I chose to trade some time for money. But I'm not going to trade safety for money, so I'm going to put a jack stand in front of the car and lower the jack just a little so that most of the weight is on the jack stand. Now that the car is off the ground, we can actually take off the wheel. This car came with keyed lug nuts. On every wheel there's a special lug nut that can only be turned with this key so that kids don't steal my precious OEM wheels. The key is just one extra thing to potentially lose, so I don't think it's really worth getting, but that's what my car came with. And with the wheel off, we turn the steering wheel all the way to the right to make it easier to access the brake. Before we fiddle with the caliper, there's something that you should take care of right now. Unlike many other cars, this car has 2 screws holding the brake rotor to the wheel hub. They're not really necessary because the wheel presses the rotor to the hub anyways, but the screws might be hard to take out. If you can't get them off with a regular screwdriver, here's what you do. Just have someone sit in the car and push down on the brake pedal, and then you can use a wrench or breaker bar to take off the screw without worrying about the wheel turning while you're doing that. This only works if you haven't removed the caliper yet, so that's why you should do it first. Now, if your car doesn't have these screws, don't worry about it. You can totally skip this step. Okay, then we can start removing the bolts that hold the brake caliper to the caliper mount. On this car, you'll need a 14mm and a 17mm wrench. The annoying thing about Mazda's design here is that if your wrench is on the thick side, it's really hard to fit it onto this top bolt. Other than that, there's nothing difficult about this step. Just don't drop the caliper on the ground because it's still connected to your car by your brake line. You can either take some coat hanger wire or a zip tie and just hang it off your springs. Some people just balance it on the wheel hub, but do you really want to risk accidentally dropping it? If you're only changing your brake pads, you can just pop the old brake pads off now and put new ones in. We're going to change the rotors as well, and to do that we also need to remove the caliper mount. Nothing particularly hard about this, and once we have it off, we can get to the fun part of removing the brake rotor.
Look at that. Comes right off.
Now we can finally see the wheel hub. This one's not too bad. Yeah, it's rusty, but not rusty enough to cause problems. I still want to clean it up a bit, so I'm just going to take a wire brush and try to get some of that off. The most important thing is to make sure there's nothing on the wheel hub that'll prevent the rotor from sitting on there flat. From this point on, it's all about putting things back on. New rotor, just pop it on. Make sure the screw holes line up, and then put the screws back on.
Well, if they don't have a spec, then it doesn't matter.
Next is bolting on the caliper mount. Before we do that, I'm going to take out these metal clips that hold the brake pad in place and clean everything up a bit. You can also just buy new clips if you want. But then add a little grease to the clips where the pads will sit on them to help prevent noise. Just be careful not to get it on your rotors. On this car, these bolts are torqued to between 58 and 75 pound-feet, which is quite different from the torque on the bolts holding the caliper to the caliper mount. So check your service manual for the torque spec on your car.
How does this thing work? Yeah, okay.
At this point, you can pop in the new brake pads. Again, make sure not to get grease on any of the friction surfaces. The other thing to grease up are the slide pins that the caliper bolted into. These are covered with a rubber sleeve so you can just pull them all the way out. Clean off the old grease and apply a good amount of new lubricant on there. And while you're at it, add some lubricant to the outside surface of each brake pad. With the new brake pads being thicker, the caliper probably isn't going to fit on now. This is where the C-clamp is useful. I just take the old brake pad and put it against the piston, then I can put the C-clamp on. Before I start pushing down the piston, I take off the cap from my brake fluid reservoir. Pushing back the piston will push brake fluid back into the reservoir, and if we don't do this, then it'll increase the pressure inside the reservoir. Also be aware, doing this to both sides might even cause brake fluid to spill over the top of the reservoir, especially if you've topped up your brake fluid when you were using your old brake pads. Go slowly, and if you see that brake fluid is about to come out of the reservoir, take your turkey baster and pull out some brake fluid into a throwaway plastic bottle. Keep in mind, you only have to push the piston enough to be able to put the caliper back on the mount. Once you do that, you can pop the caliper back onto the mount. 2 bolts, one at the top, one at the bottom. On my car, I need to torque it to 20 pound-feet, but again, look it up for your car. Great, we now have everything back on except for the wheel. Before you pop the wheel on, go ahead and pump the brake pedal a few times to push the piston back into place. It should feel soft on the first few pumps, but then give you normal resistance. All that's left now is to put on the wheel. Hand tighten the lug nuts as best as you can for now. I find rotating the wheel as you're doing that makes it easier. Then, remove the jack stand and lower the car back on the ground. Finally, tighten the lug nuts to the required spec, which is around 75 or 80 pound-feet on this car, using a torque wrench. Remember to go in a star-shaped pattern where you tighten the bolt opposite of the one you just tightened. And that's pretty much it. After you do the exact same process on the other side, you can start driving on your car. A lot of brake pads give you instructions for bedding in your brakes, which usually involve doing a lot of quick slowdowns from a high speed to a low speed without stopping. But if you don't have a big parking lot nearby to do this in, it's not a big deal. Just avoid braking really hard for a few hundred miles and your brakes will bed in naturally over time. If you have tips on how to change your brakes, post them in the comments below and I'm sure other people will really appreciate them. Thanks for watching and hit that subscribe button if you want to see more videos.